Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you again so much for being here. I'm really excited to be finally here at this webinar. It's been a long time coming because this has been a really interesting topic. As you can see from your screen, it's called Reach Every HCP, Realize Every Opportunity. A bit of a strange title, but what we really want to focus on here is this idea of accessibility. How do we make sure that nobody is left out? We obviously talk a lot about health equity and the patient side of it, but how do we make sure that that health equity is being realized by every HCP actually understanding what it is that we need to be focusing on in the first place? So my name is Paul Sims. I'm calling you today from home in London, and I'm about to introduce some wonderful people who are going to join with me. We've had about 600 of you sign up for this session, which is great because honestly, when we first put this one together, we had no idea how popular it was going to be. It's not something that we're talking about nearly as often as perhaps we should. And I can already see that a fair few of you have been to one of my webinars before because you are introducing yourself in that chat window. If you haven't already done so, please say a quick hello, tell us where you're calling from. And maybe in particular for this session, because it is a different topic from something that we typically have covered, tell us what it is that you are most interested in finding out about today. That would be super useful information for me and for the other panelists as we go about the session. From my point of view, I would say that this is so important and so overlooked. It's important because how can we claim to be equitable in health if we are not ensuring that we're reaching every HCP? How can we claim to actually have broad reach and impact on a global scale? And how can we claim to be patient-centric when it's only the case that a certain segment of people are actually being covered? It's overlooked because, of course, we as an industry have tended to stray towards specialty products, unless, of course, you are a GLP-1 manufacturer right now. You are probably looking at your specialty portfolio as the way of driving your organization forward from here. It's also very important because when we focus on digital, on omni-channel, we assume, I think, that that means that everybody can achieve and reach and hear what it is that we have to say. That is a very myopic view, I would argue. And just because things are going more digital does not mean that we necessarily meet everybody in our conversation. And then finally, also limited metrics, I would argue. Another reason why we're not doing this very well. We are fantastic at vanity metrics in our industry. We are not so good at focusing on conversion metrics. And I imagine that that will probably come up in today's conversation as well. So many reasons why this is such an important topic. And the great news is, as I've already said, there's a few people who are going to join me and be a part of this conversation. So Kishan, or Kish, has become a good friend of mine over the last couple of years. He's currently with Bayer, and he's doing some interesting things all day. He decided to put me on edge. If you've been looking at LinkedIn, you know, telling me about his cycle ride home and whether or not he's even going to make it to this webinar. Well, fortunately, he has. He is, of course, Senior Director of Cardiovascular and Digital within Medical Affairs at Bayer, previously at Sanofi. And in general, I would say is a very open-minded person that will do whatever it takes to get that message through. And I've been really pleased to have Kishan on my second webinar today. So thank you so much. Monica is also someone I've got to know pretty well over the last year or so. She's the US Medical Lead and Omnichannel Medical Engagement Strategy Head at Sanofi, focusing on the vaccines business and based in Pennsylvania, USA. She has a deep background as a practicing physician in both first world and developing settings, and is passionate about making that education available to HCPs. Really interesting background from South Africa. And her work, of course, in omnichannel is designed to indeed achieve a lot of what I've just said. Mansi, someone I've got to know just recently, but very much enjoyed doing so. She's the Director of Medical Affairs Digital Excellence at Astellas. She's committed to revolutionizing the way digital channels deliver critical medical knowledge. She's based in North Carolina, but often working very globally. In fact, in our prep call, she was in India. And she's had a lot of personal experiences that she may be able to share, as well as a strong dedication to understanding and improving the impact of medical content. Jonathan, is from EPG Health, a company which I really hope most of you in the room have become familiar with, recently acquired by IQVIA, one of my favorite groups to work with. And this is the second time we're doing a webinar together because these guys are not just committed to driving the cost of medicine and driving the reach, they're also committed to the social agenda as well. And they're a fantastic company to work with. The platform, MedThority, is one of the leaders in HCP engagement in general as a platform, and of course in disseminating information for HCPs on the behalf of pharma companies as well. And I think it was Jonathan, it's fair to say, who was the driving force most of all behind putting this webinar on. So we have him to thank for being so genuine and actually making sure it happened. I would also like to just issue a quick disclaimer on this one, and I know that it's already written on the previous slide, but I want to be really clear here. All panelists are paid employees of their respective companies. The content and views are intended for information only, no other form of medical legal advice involved, and everyone is, of course, speaking from their own personal opinion. Now, you might recall that when you joined this webinar, I actually asked you to answer a couple of questions, whether you did that today or recently. So the first question was indeed this one: how committed is your function to supporting accessibility of education for all HCPs? Well, we've got some numbers on the screen, and I'd be delighted to tell you which one corresponds to which. So let's go with the one that was at the top first, which is the highly committed. What number do you think that was? Well, it was this one here. 29.2% of people saying highly committed with dedicated strategy and budget. Now, you might argue that that's not bad. That is a good number. It's actually probably better than I expected, but it's not enough, in my opinion. So this is where the majority of us live. Over 50% of us actively exploring opportunities to improve. Well, I would argue that's still somewhat with a way to go. 10% of people saying that the issue of access has limited attention, and then of course 3% were not aware of the issue at all. So there you go. There's the full results. That was the first question. Second question is as follows: when it comes to achieving HCP access, what's your top priority? As you can see, maybe a little bit more of an even distribution here. Let's just go in order this time of the biggest first. So that's 30%, and that was quality of engagement. Perhaps no surprises there. Quality of engagement being the number one choice. Demonstrating impact on the next highest level. The next one is highly targeted prescriber reach. And then next was multidisciplinary stakeholder reach. And then overall volume. And finally, the last one, demonstrating learning. So there's the full results for you. More of an interesting widespread thing there. And before we get to the panel, I can see a couple of them have turned their cameras on already, just can't wait to get involved. But before we go to them, I would like to just ask you guys one more question. Well, actually, I say one more. It's actually a two-part question. So if you look at your screen right now, you'll see a question pop up. It's called Greatest Need. So as I said, it's a two-parter. If it hasn't arrived, it should be arriving in a second. Number one, where do you believe is the greatest need for accessibility in the context of HCP education? Where is the greatest need? So there's a few answers there that you'll need to actually read carefully before you answer. The second part, which HCP group do you believe experiences the most significant challenges accessing medical education? So a two-part question there. I'm going to hold that open actually for probably about 3 or 4 minutes. So take your time, make sure you answer it correctly, and we'll see the results in a few minutes. I will also say, yes, we are recording today's session. You don't need to ask me about that, and we will send you a recording of that. And I do really want this to be a dialogue, a two-way, three-way, four-way conversation, not just a didactic thing. So please keep as active as you can in that chat window. It was great to see that everyone's already familiarized themselves and said hello, which is wonderful. Right. Any panelists who haven't turned their cameras on, please do so at this point. I am going to get rid of the slides. And I would love to just hear from each of you. When we did our pre-prep call, the passion here was beautiful to see. So I want to get a little flavor of that going right from the beginning. Why are you passionate about this? And why is it a big challenge for us as companies, as an industry, even maybe as individuals? So who would like to kick us off on that little storyline first?
I can jump in, Paul.
Monica, gold
So for
star.
me, I think you know, as a physician, you kind of recognize that better informed physicians equals better care for patients. And so we need to just make sure that providers and whoever that HCP is, and not only for actually physicians, but anyone who's in the healthcare professional team, has access to information, easy access.
That was very simple. That was very effective, Monica. But why do you think that it's in a place of deficit right now?
I don't, I think we often put a lot of focus on conferences and places where people come together to meet. But that's just not easily accessible to everyone, right? Geographically, even within a medical team, often your more senior folks get to go to conferences. People who really need to do the learning and the catch up are not part of that type of networking. And so I think we just need to be very mindful that there are people at very different levels of accessibility, and let's just make sure that we bring learning and content, make it available to everybody, irrespective of where they are.
Okay. I would love to hear from someone else. Who's next? Go on, Jonathan.
I'll go forward if
As I
that's
said,
all right.
you were the inspiration here, so I'm expecting big things from you.
Well, no pressure. It's lovely to meet everybody, and yeah, this is a passion of ours. And I think the questions we asked at the beginning that you've raised actually almost address the point and why there's such a passion behind this. So if you think about what does achieving access look like, which was the second question that we've already answered. I think 22% was impact, 21% was hyper targeted around prescribers, and then the main one was around quality engagement. Well, I think that they're all really important things to consider, but are they the most important? You can't have impact, you can't reach prescribers unless you've addressed accessibility. And I think running the website we do, MedAuthority, we can see engagement of healthcare professionals across MedAuthority. We know how time poor they are, we know how pressured they are. But there is so many inequalities when it comes to accessibility that I think it's the single most important thing we need to address across all the channels in order to get the impact that the healthcare professionals deserve and probably everybody on this call wants to achieve. So I think unless we're addressing accessibility, breaking down the barriers and democratizing accessibility, we won't achieve the impact. And just the final point, I think the 21% of targeting prescribers, that's a very small population of healthcare professionals that are involved in that patient pathway. How are we accessing all of the other healthcare professionals that impact on that patient journey and the outcomes of that patient? So yeah, I think this is the single most important thing we need to address as a group in order to help the impact for pharma and healthcare professionals.
It is indeed crucial. Mansi or Kish, I would love to hear from you.
I can go next, if you're okay with that, Krish.
Yeah, of course, go for it. Okay. Ladies first.
All right, so I am extremely passionate about this topic because of two reasons. So first of all, I have seen this from both ends, right? I work for a pharma responsible for a ton of HCP engagement and HCP education, and I'm mother of a child who has a rare disease. And I have gone through this insane process of diagnosis and treatment that was so hard because of lack of that readily available HCP education. Also, I grew up in India, in a third world country, I would say, where HCPs are very creative, but they don't always have access to all of the cutting edge education. I have lived in America for a very long time now, and I see like how we kind of focus on these KEEs and stuff. So I have a lot of perspective in that area as well. And I think, in my opinion, the number one issue with HCP education, after having many discussions, is time constraint. A ton of these first line primary care healthcare physicians just do not have the time required to get into all of the knowledge that is available in the market. There's an insane amount of data out there. I think our job is to find a way to provide that knowledge in a way that is digestible, easy to read, and does not require too much time from them. But so I think for me, it's easy. It's extremely important to solve for that content, that personalized content, that is delivered via the right channel at the right time.
Thank you, thank you. And Kish, I know you're fighting to have a word, but I'm just going to actually show the results of the poll, and maybe you can even comment on that as well. When you,
okay, thanks. Put me on the spot. Okay, let's go. Let's go for it. That'll be
close
fun.
that poll and share the results. Sorry, it takes, I don't know what's going on with Zoom
It
these
was a
days.
shame. I wanted to vote in it, Paul. That's the thing.
I know you guys don't get to
mess.
vote. I'm so sorry about
Is
that.
that...
You can tell us what you would have said.
I didn't read it. Dyslexic. I didn't get through it in time.
Okay, well, the answers are on the screen right now. You can see the results. We've got about, what have we got? 43% of people say that the greatest need is ensuring content is available and understandable for time and workload constrained HCPs. That feels like the usual omni-channel mantra, I have to be honest with you, that one is the winner. I was sort of hoping I'd see some of the other ones score a little bit more highly as opposed to that, but at the same time, I'm not hugely surprised. Which HCP group do you believe experiences the most significant challenges? Well, it's slightly more of an even spread on this one. Nearly 30% of people saying GPs, primary care, which is interesting. That's obviously the largest group typically. And of course, over a quarter of people saying HCPs in rural, underserved, or developing regions. But no one got nothing in that one, so that's interesting. Kish, over to you. Please do answer that original question. What's what's your motivation? What's the challenge? As well as commenting it.
A quick comment on the results while it's there is providing educational content is inclusive for those with disabilities, 0 out of 86. That, does it surprise me? Not really. Does it shock me? 100%. Because I think if we look at ourselves organisationally, how inclusive are we of the populations we serve? And how many people with disabilities, whether they be hidden or not, are in life sciences? And I would probably suggest it's a minority. But just going back to everybody's points, and particularly Mansi's, the reason why I'm motivated and excited by this is we are, all of us, in an immense position of privilege. Working in the pharmaceutical/life sciences industry, we all daily have conversations with the world's best experts. Our own networks, whether they be personally or professionally, are possibly the single greatest source of knowledge. And I was reflecting on this when I was getting ready for the webinar just this morning, and I was thinking, my knowledge of diabetes increased massively with AstraZeneca. My knowledge of dermatology increased when I was with Sanofi, and then same from across the brands and across the therapy areas that I work with now. So I think from a personal perspective, I've always seen digital, and everyone's got a different definition of digital, and I get that. But from my work in digital, I see it as a bit of an extension of my Hippocratic Oath. So the principles, the practices, everything that I signed up to Monica, your point as a practicing physician, how do I then play and work in this regulated environment, and regulated for good reason, but getting content out there that actually helps people? And I think to summarize it, a bit of an existential question that I always have with teams and colleagues, and you'll always hear me talking about this, is how do we organize ourselves internally so that we can engage externally with that impact that we were all alluding to?
Okay, so some passionate comments from the panel. I'm pleased to see some passionate comments coming from those in the audience as well, and we will do our best to sort of multitask and be involved in both conversations here, so keep that coming, please. I think this is really interesting that we have recognized, or we are failing to recognize, but are starting to recognize that equity starts at home, and that we are indeed, as Kish says, in a very privileged position right now. I want to start talking about the internal challenge. And I guess I'm quite keen to hear from those of you working for pharma companies, both in the audience and on the panel. What do you guys regard as the barrier here? So you've got your personal passion. What's stopping you from actually being able to make progress here? Does it feel like a legitimate concern? Does it feel like an internal priority? Does it feel like there's budget that's available for you to make a difference here? Does it feel like it's part of your mandate and your job role? I'm really curious as to whether or not there there is an opportunity, in your opinion, here, or whether you feel like it's pushed to the edges. So whoever wants to be as honest as you can, of course, in saying what you think.
Do you want me to go first?
Go
this
for it,
time?
Kish. Your turn. Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, I think it's not answering your question, Paul, because the
Oh,
honest
that's right.
answer is we've got the opportunity. So a lot of people will know externally that Bayer is undergoing something called dynamic shared ownership, which is ultimately how do we form small entrepreneurial sub-teams? And as long as that is in pursuit of the mission, health for all, hunger for none, it's a culture where science is boss. And yes, there's rules. Yes, there's regulation. We can't just do anything we want, of course. But ultimately, it's about unlocking and unleashing that creative potential that's hidden away inside of all of us in life sciences, but is often sometimes suppressed because of the frameworks and the environments that we work in, so that we can put innovative, impactful solutions to market. So I'm sorry, it doesn't answer the question 100%, Paul, but I genuinely feel that I can give you a little example. We've hired a TikToker. We've hired somebody who has set up a TikTok influencer profile 3 years ago. So we're trying to live and breathe those values of being entrepreneurial to better serve populations that we are ultimately giving content to, who are our audiences.
So Kish, just sticking with you for a second, I'm personally quite familiar with the DSO model. I've been studying what Bill Anderson has been doing both here and at Rush in his previous role. But I get that it provides a certain level of freedom. But I guess my question here is also about priorities. Is there something that's allowing us to prioritize this internally, or is it a free-for-all? And I suppose
think that's the
how important is it in everyone's consciousness?
Yes, it's that aligned purpose, right? It's everybody pulling in the same direction, sharing knowledge internally within teams, smashing down silos. Frankly, it doesn't really matter where people sit. So although my thing said global medical affairs, that function doesn't actually exist anymore. We're all part of a global commercialization unit. And whether you're a medic, whether you're a marketeer, there's an expectation that people play to their skill sets, whether it be medical, whether it be marketing, and we're upskilling across various disciplines, which I think is critical. Because I think if we start siloing people in roles or descriptions, there's a danger that you're not tapping into that. And one of my comments just at the beginning was, it says, how committed is your function? The questions at the webinar at the beginning. I'd say, how committed is your organization? At an organizational level, how committed are we to ultimately moving the needle for patient care around the world?
Yeah.
I'll put that out there.
Monica and Mansi would love to hear your thoughts on priorities. And what I'm also going to do is get a little audience votes going on exactly or pretty much the same question in the background. So you will have hopefully see that arrive in seconds when it finally does actually show up, and you can answer that. But Mansi, Monica.
Yeah. So I think the intent is there. Definitely, it is a priority. And I will tell you that there has been several initiatives to just remove those barriers and remove those silos and come across to our HCP as one pharma company. It doesn't matter. It shouldn't come from like a commercial or an MA or a PV or a development team. It should just be one pharma company, and you're engaging with them. So we have a tremendous amount of effort going into this here. I feel like the biggest problem is, in my opinion, is we try to push knowledge and content to HCPs that we think they need without actually really understanding the gaps are. Yes, we do get that information from some KEEs, from some MSLs, and so like a small set of these HCPs, but we truly do not understand where the gaps are. And then the impact. I always want to talk about this impact. Yes, you pushed all of this content out via all of these channels, but did you truly understand the impact it made? And I guess that's a big gap in the industry as a whole right now. And once we tap into that, then we would be able to deliver the right information.
Thank you. Thank you. Monica, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I think very, very aligned with what Mansi said. Definitely the intent is there. I think from our perspective, and I'm seeing a couple of things in the chat which definitely resonate as well, is we we have great content. We know what we want to share with folks. We think we know what they want. And I don't think we spend enough time really having that something to be aware of. And I think to just make it more available is really finding out, are we answering the questions people have, or giving them a platform where it's really more bi-directional, right? We doing a great job of sharing information. I don't know if we're always doing such a great job of hearing back and then tailoring to those needs. And so I think that's definitely an area where we can do better. I think we work under a lot of assumptions. And I understand why, because when you're developing content and you're trying to get it out there, you have to start somewhere. But I think we need to start doing a better job of understanding if we landing it well, if it's what truly answering the questions people have, and giving them that platform to request more, or to request that we go down maybe a different path if that's what's needed.
Absolutely. I'm going to ask Jonathan to share a couple more ideas from his side in just 1 second. And I believe I've got a slide which I can share on your behalf, Jonathan, but I'm going to close this poll in about 5 seconds, and only half of you have voted so far. So get your votes in. I'm going to count you down and hopefully see a little flurry of answers. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, thank you so much to everybody who voted. I can see that this perhaps was a slightly trickier question than all of the others. Let's have a look at the results. Not sure if you can see it yet, but the answer to the first question is that, very interestingly, now normally I don't bother to even look at the answer of I don't work for a pharma company, but I think it's very interesting that nearly half of people on this call are choosing that. Does that mean that pharma companies themselves are not engaging as much with this as they should? Interesting, because normally that answer is about 20%, by the way. There's also a couple of very low scores on here. 0% of people saying expanding reach, which is really interesting. I actually thought that would get a few things. And the highest, well, the second highest is tailoring content to specific HCPs roles or needs. Again, not a surprise. You could argue that is also traditional segmentation, but of course it can help a lot with equitability and reach as well. Let's look at the second part of the question. How well does your current digital strategy support HCPs in remote, low resource or low bandwidth settings? I thought I would focus on this one specifically. And again, very low, 2% say we invest heavily. And it's obviously a lot higher towards the bottom of that graph as well. We need to do better. That is obviously the case. So Jonathan, I'm going to hand over to you. I'm going to see if I can be clever on the old slides while I talk to you here, as I've had to do a little bit of multitasking behind the scenes. Not my usual forte, I've got to be honest. You might have to start talking for 2 seconds while I get the slide up and running.
Yeah, I will do. And I think it's such an interesting, I can see the chat coming, and there's such a focus on impact, and completely agree. And Mancy's point about impact, and I can see people contributing to discussing why do we do this? What is the impact of doing this? And it is such an important aspect, because, if we are developing content that's tailored for the healthcare professional, you would expect to see impact. I've actually chosen to have four key bits of data that came out of a report and I can see a few people in the chat have been asking, do we actually ask the healthcare professional needs? Well, we produced a report to do exactly that. We looked at the HCP need and the pharma need, and we compared the two. And I chose these four data points from the report on purpose. And I think it's important. I'd like to start on the right-hand side, actually, with the pharma need, because to the point that I can see in the chat, this theme, pharma are finding it difficult to demonstrate the impact of the education they're providing. Now, we're talking about digital education here, because that's what EPG Health we do. And also not measuring the impact on that activity is also a major challenge for pharma, and it's what they perceive as their biggest need. Now, I would argue that is not the biggest need, because actually measuring impact, which we can do and others can do, is possible. There is great methodology to do impact through all the different channels that we're doing. And I think we know actually how to do it. The reason we're not getting the impact is because we're not addressing the fundamental issue, is that healthcare professionals are not accessing the content. They're not accessing the content in a time that's suitable for them. And I can see again the chats people are asking around time poor healthcare professionals, GPs the biggest need. All the different personas of healthcare professionals have their own unique challenge. And in a minute, I'd like to talk about sort of the behavioural side that we see of a digital healthcare professional. But Eva Stanbury, right at the beginning, you put, I would like to understand how healthcare professionals find the information and how we signal it to them. Well, to that point, Eva, we know that healthcare professionals, nearly 80%, are regularly online looking for information to help them in clinical practice. But over half, when we ask them, they can't find it. They can't find the trusted content that helps them make a bigger decision. What is that? That's accessibility. They either don't know where to go, the content's not right, it's not trusted. But moreover, what we see with healthcare professionals, it's because of the time, it's because of the engagement on content. So 60% of every first session will be on a mobile. Ours is slightly lower than average, actually, but that's because healthcare professionals know authority, and often there's some deeper content and they may choose to access on a laptop or a device that's more appropriate for that deeper learning. But what we know is with the younger population, and remember that we are hurtling towards, in the next couple of years, 75% of all healthcare professionals will be millennials. That blows my mind. They all, when we look on our website, they are all using a mobile device. And they don't just use, what we used to see is healthcare professionals would use a mobile device on the first, maybe the second session. Third session would be on a laptop. Definitely varies on the time of day. What we see now, particularly with the younger population of healthcare professionals, it's all on a mobile device. They're all using mobile devices to contact this. So why is that important to know? That means that the content has to be mobile optimized for one. It needs, you get 3 scrolls. If you don't get to the content that they're looking for in 3 scrolls, they're gone. There's a very high expectation of the younger population of content online. They have, they are experts on it. But there's also other aspects to consider as well. And I think, we're looking at, we asked the question about, are we investing in developing countries? Well, I can tell you that we're never asked, really. It's a global program, but we want you to focus here. We want you to focus on the prescribers, similar to the question we had there. We're missing out a whole chunk of healthcare professionals involved in that health ecosystem of that patient because we're not directing our resources to focus on that. And I think accessibility can cut in so many different ways. So why can't healthcare professionals find that content? Well, either we're not signaling them. Again, Eva, to your point, are we triggering the healthcare professionals to get it on the mobile? Probably not. Are we diverting our investment into the whole group of healthcare professionals involved? Probably not. But when we're thinking about mobile technology, for example, we spend a lot of time looking at the inequity of connectivity. It's huge. So a nurse in Africa will have probably not access to Wi-Fi in the same way that we do perhaps with European nurses. It's just we can see it. That makes the type of content we have to provide in that area different. It has to be personalized for the availability of that content. But what's most interesting, I think, and actually most relevant, maybe to the current tactics or priorities of our clients is if you look at North America, the connectivity to authority that we can track in North America on a mobile device is significantly lower than that in European countries. There is an inequity that we have to consider even when we're targeting healthcare professionals in the US. And then when you overlay that we're only targeting, we've got a high demand to target the prescribers and we're missing out the other group, perhaps the other group that are not specialists and maybe do not have access to Wi-Fi, or they don't want to download the data because it's going to trade time. We need to not only bespoke the content so it's relevant for clinical practice, we need to bespoke the content so it's relevant for being able to download it in the first instance. There are so many different layers to accessibility that we just haven't got into yet. I'm talking from a digital perspective, but you just have to look at congresses. Congress, I think, is the single biggest challenge to accessibility and the biggest milestone for a lot of our clients. And they're great, they're important. But you go to, what's the Congress coming up? Maybe ESC. 20,000 cardiologists will go to ESC. All of the other healthcare professionals that are not going to that Congress will not have access to that data. We also know that they won't access the website to get the data thereafter because they're not members or they haven't done it. So we are excluding a group. We are not making the content accessible for all. And that's where I think impact is not the biggest need for pharma. accessibility is the biggest need to get right for pharma to help the healthcare professionals access the content they need. And let's democratize it. Let's make sure there are no inequities across accessibility for healthcare professionals. Christian's got his hand up, so I feel like I should.
Yeah, thank you. I was gonna, I wasn't sure. I wanted to make sure you finished your point well, Jonathan. Thank you for a very motivating set of facts there. Kish, what do you have to say?
So it blew my mind, Jonathan, when you said that in the rehearsal call about the connectivity in North America. So it was a bit of a pickup on that. It was amazing to think sometimes we think we know what we know, but actually, unless we ask, we don't. And there were some comments in this comments about ethnographic studies, and I think that's probably a fair shout, and I think that's quite interesting. So the connectivity piece is interesting, and I wanted to just build on it a little bit with one thing I was kind of monitoring in the chat, and there's a bit of a follow-up from Sian about silos. And it was describe something that she likes, but haven't seen much of it. What I often see as a silos, everyone describes compliance around engagement and partnership being confusing and non-supportive, with the inevitable drive to develop and move people around and up the organization. You encounter the ability to build long-lasting capabilities of staff. And I'd agree with that. But I think, again, it comes down to small micro-entrepreneurial teams, almost like pluripotent stem cells. If you have people in teams that can do 1 or 2 roles coherently and up to a good standard, you can always kick it up for expert advice. But how do you, I mean, it was great. So Marcus, my boss that hired me at Bayer, when we went out to Berlin, it was escalated up to the VP to whether you can film on site. So of course it's important, and we need to make sure it's filmed, but you can have, or filming's done appropriately, but you can have delegation of authority in certain areas to allow that headspace and that mind space to come up with creative solutions. I don't know if that helps, Sian, maybe it makes it more complicated, I don't know, but that was something that was running through my mind.
Cool, thank you. Okay, so time is marching on, only 20 minutes left, and maybe Sian can, by the way, can reply in the chat as to whether or not question has been answered. But I would love to get more reactions to what Jonathan has just said, and whether or not you see it reflected in your own organizations. Really appreciate, Jonathan, your cross-industry view and saying that you just don't get asked a lot of the time for some of these areas, and that is a very transparent situation that we need to be fully cognizant of. At the same time, I'm going to do one more of the lovely poll questions that you're all loving so much, and this one is about barriers, which is a topic that has already come up in the conversation as well. So when that finally appears, I'll give you a few minutes to answer that. Reactions from Monica and Mansi.
Yeah, I think one of the things that really struck me with what Jonathan shared, it was also in our meeting, and it was something similar to what Kishan said, was that accessibility to a mobile, to information online is actually the connectivity issue, I think, is really what sort of struck me. Because I think often you'll read data and you'll see, well, 80% of HCPs or higher, use mobile device, they get online. So as a solution, then you jump on, well, then let's bring more digital solutions to folks, educate them that way. We'll use the devices that they have to bring them information. But I think that it's really the accessibility piece to that is often an area that we overlook. So we all have these great solutions. We just don't always recognize that we're not able to bring it to people in that real time frame that we're thinking about. And so I think that there's a lot to think about with access. How do you actually make sure that information is available for longer periods of time? If it's from a conference, don't always assume that someone can just link in and watch it live, but maybe have information available long after, because I think we can bring things in a digital space. We just need to be more mindful of when people can access that, and so thinking about the actual dissemination of it, as well as the fact that we're bringing it in that way.
Thank you, very useful perspective. And Mansi, love your reaction, but also take us into the final real topic for today, which is how do we make it actually stick in our organizations? So if you can somehow cover both those things, I don't want to put too much on you, but if you can somehow move us in, that would be wonderful.
Yes, absolutely. And I actually concur with Monica completely, right? So I think it was quite surprising to hear that those metrics around access, Jonathan. And I will tell you, I have not used access as a parameter when I do my planning for my digital engagement, non-personal engagement channels, right? So for me, it's like, okay, we have all of these MSLs and like field people going to KOLs. For the rest of the universe, let me put this on the web or the chat or whatever, but I have not thought about the parameter. What about people who don't have access to the internet or fast enough internet? Or what about the offices where there's just one computer, right? They don't have a personal computer to access all of this information. So do I have a solution? But no, I think it has just opened up my eyes to something that I am going to think through in future as I put together my digital strategy. Now, coming to your question on how do you make it stick? I think, first of all, I think my first thing, if I put myself in the HCP's shoes, I think we need to understand and know that HCP's journey, right, as a pharma company. Can you make sure you understand that they spoke to a sales rep yesterday and then tomorrow they are going to talk to an MSL? Are you able to make that connection? Can you say, hey, yesterday you were interested in that topic, you may also like. So all of us love our Netflix and Amazon experiences, right? We log in from any device and it's like identifying what we have used or watched in the past, and they come back and say, you may also like, right? So I think that is my perspective, is like, that is the kind of service you need to provide to our HCPs. The personalized content delivery, the personalized education delivery, giving them what they are looking for before they even ask for it, is what is going to make it stick.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to show the results of the poll because actually it sort of aligns with something that Mansi was just saying, and also something that I had on my list of topics to cover. And if you finally see the results when they appear, you will see that the highest mark with nearly 50% of the votes is metrics as the biggest barrier, unclear metrics for measuring educational outcomes. And I would really like to just have a quick discussion about this, if that's okay. How can we ensure, because of course we all know the Drucker phrase, what gets measured gets managed, and perhaps part of the reason here is that they're simply not appearing on our dashboards right now. Jonathan, it feels to me like you could quantify this relatively easily from where you're sitting, but what you probably need is for some of your clients to be willing to take those metrics and ensure that they are visible. So really clear, really keen to hear just, you know, how we tackle this thorny bush of metrics.
So I think, I mean, metrics I mean, they're constantly evolving, to be honest. And I think, you mentioned the vanity metrics right at the beginning, which historically we've been asked to present. And historically we've kind of fought back to say that, the reach numbers simply are meaningless. Impressions are not impactful in any way. And we're seeing that change now. The conversations we're having around metrics with our clients have evolved to the point where you wouldn't recognize what we were talking about even 2 years ago, which is fantastic. But I think even with metrics, you can pull it back to accessibility. So we will track what we call learning stages on MedAuthority. So we can track a healthcare professional's acceptance of learning through 5 stages. And even that you need to consider about, is the healthcare professional aware of they've got an educational need? Are they actively online searching to address that educational need? We can track all of this with metrics, by the way. We know what they're looking for online. We know what they're looking for on MedAuthority. We've got an advantage there, so we know who they are. So what we need to do is, if you're thinking about your metrics and you're thinking about accessibility, yes, you've got your target group. Yes, we need to look at the whole healthcare professional group that's involved with that patient group. We need to design content that's personalized, which we've already said. But what do the metrics look like? Well, yeah, we need to get the content in front of enough healthcare professionals to make it a meaningful investment for our clients. Absolutely. But that's the easiest piece. The hardest piece is getting them back. And that's where your metrics need to consider the trend data, or what the behaviors are of healthcare professionals online for metrics. So what kind of things do we look at? We look at time of engagement. What time of day do healthcare professionals engage with content? What type of device are they engaging on? These are all important metrics to consider when we're thinking about accessibility. What's the age profile? what's the geographies that we're targeting, and that will influence the channels we'll use. All of these aspects of metrics that we will have considered before we even start tracking the outcome metrics of what we're doing, because it will inform how we target. To the point, and I guess there's marketeers on the call, what time of day do we send the comms? The hardest thing is to get a healthcare professional back. And when we're talking about stickiness, they're not going to go and spend an hour in your content just because it's available online. That's simply not going to happen. They will probably, on that first visit, spend maybe a minute or a minute and a half at best looking at your content, because it will be on a mobile. It will be just as they're getting on a train. It will be just as they're walking into work, because it will probably come through on an email. There's an open rate and click-through rate, and we all know what those are like. Probably they'll react to it on a social media post. If you're allowed to do that, we are, which is great. So they will probably react to it. So it's disruptive. It's a disruptive campaign. They're not going to sit down and spend the half an hour learning at that moment. So the stickiness comes from repeat visits. So as we're tracking healthcare professionals through their stages of learning on the content on our website, Authority, and we get them to what we call learning stage 3, we're seeing them spend up to 2 hours in the content. But that is over multiple sessions at a time that's been convenient for them. And they don't just come back because they feel like they remember they're busy. They're just like all of us. We go to a website, unless we're going to buy the clothes that we forgot to buy or something that's there, they're not going to come back to your content. You have to remind them. So I would say, when we're talking metrics, let's talk about metrics going to inform how you make that content available and accessible, and then we can think about the impact. And the impact needs to be not impressions, not data. It needs to be, and not even a page view or an average session time. These are meaningless. Set up your metrics that show active engagement on your website. I can only talk about websites, but active engagement on your website, scroll depth, plays, video loads, actually interacting with the content. These are all things we talk about, and we can be then confident that there's active learning on the website. But there's just too many metrics to mention that we should be considering, and obviously we spend all day in it.
Yeah. So just Jonathan, I know there's others who want to jump in, but Jonathan, just sticking you with one more second, if that's okay. Our mutual friend Dani Duplessis wrote earlier in the webinar, I wonder when we'll actually ask end users what their needs are. So I guess my first question is, do you feel like you really do know that? It sounds like you do, but I just want to verify that we do. And then secondly, looking across the metrics that you see and that even many pharma companies do not see or do not take seriously, is there any common mistake or common wish that you would have that pharma companies would prioritize better or would do better across the various metrics that you get to see?
So gosh, what a question, especially if we've got so many pharma colleagues on the call. How do I...
Don't worry, you'd have to name any names.
I would love it if we were asked not to only target the prescribers and the specialists. Even yesterday, we had a call with a client and they said, we're not interested in else, just target the specialists. Just get us the prescribers.
And that's a myopic view, in your opinion?
I just think it's fairly one-dimensional. And I think it's damaging the ability to have the content is less impactful if we're targeting one person that's involved in that patient pathway. And it happens a lot, I'll be honest. It's a frustration. And I think let's not expect healthcare professionals to be sitting there waiting for content to come out. I think there's still maybe a mentality that healthcare professionals are on their laptops waiting for the latest bit of content to come out. And that's just not how life is. You have to understand the behavior of the healthcare professional. I think that's sometimes not understood.
Right, taking a more holistic, more behavioral understanding. And on Dani's point, do we really understand the HCP? Do you feel that do you feel like you ask them or
So we do our best. I think, to be honest, we've adapted our approach recently because of what we've started to realize around accessibility. I think we fell into the trap of having steering committees that were specialists only. Right. And I think that can give that slightly warped view, or not that holistic view is probably a better way to describe it. So we've changed our practices based on what we've started to do. But I think because of that, we're beginning to understand the holistic need as opposed to the perceived need of the specialist.
Right. Time is marching on. I'd love to hear from everybody. Mansi's got her hand up. So Mansi.
Yeah, I think I just I heard all of those metrics, and I completely concur with Jonathan. And I think some of these metrics I'm questioning as well. So time on a website or a web page is something that we used to have as a metric, right? Do we want HCPs to stay on our page? But is that really right? If you are able to provide them the right answers, the right education, the right content, they shouldn't ideally be spending a ton of time on your web page. They should look for that answer and they should go away. So I guess this is just one example I'm giving on how I am trying to look at those metrics KPIs that we capture in a different way. The other thing that I wanted to mention is loyalty, right? It's an uphill battle to have HCPs register for your pharma websites, to subscribe to those updates, to remind them to come back for new content. I think that's a generalized problem, right? How do we make the HCPs come back? The loyalty is always like a struggle. And the third thing I will tell you, I used to run the MedInfo call center in the US. And we used to send out like a small survey after each email response of MedInfo response we sent. I will tell you the response rate of those of those surveys was extremely low, so low that I don't even want to mention the percent here. So it's an uphill battle to even get those responses on surveys. I'm not trying to give you solutions, but I'm trying to highlight some of the problems that I have seen personally with HCPs when it comes to metrics.
Thank you for that. Really appreciate it. Kish.
And just to build on Mansi's point, I was going to come in on specialty care and primary care, but I'll come to that in a minute. But Mansi, your point about metrics and how do we make them come back? And I think content is king, right? If we pull together and we make content that's actually helpful, actually engaging, and also we give up a little bit of control, and we might not know everything about everybody that is looking at our content. I think it helps. And the thing that comes to mind was actually when I was with Sanofi a couple of years ago and the team in the UK, it was literally something as simple as, have you got a minute? And it's literally get the MSLs to go out and present themselves and present information in a way that's helpful, accessible. So it's that door opener piece. But there's a follow-up from Sean about like the pluripotent stem cell piece. Just update you, Paul, on that. That's good. And to tie that,
it's going to stick. It's going to stick.
Is it? I think it might, yeah. And just to tie in terms of, I think if we can reimagine how we might interact with healthcare systems, in all of the companies that I've had the privilege of working with, as in AstraZeneca, Sanofi, and now Bayer, there are people in those organizations that have skills, capabilities, and knowledge that people on the front line, people trying to deliver healthcare, are crying out for. So if we can see how we can supplement and augment and help raise the ocean, then everybody succeeds. And there's a comment in that about why do pharma not work together? So I don't know, I'll put that into I'll let people in the chat say why they think we don't work together, but that was just a couple of pickups.
I mean, people will cite competition perhaps, but I think pharma doesn't work together because it doesn't realize it can a lot of the time. But there we go. Maybe Jonathan, you can give us an answer on that as well. We are fast running out of time, as I've already said. Just 4 minutes left. What I would love to do, everyone's going to have to be relatively quick with their comment here. What is, Monday morning and you are CEO of your company? Jonathan pretty much is already, but for the rest of you, big promotion, so well done. What are you going to do Monday morning to make a change that is going to affect this situation? You can only choose one thing. You can choose either something that you would do or something that you would stop doing. I don't mind which one it is. And I've got a final poll for everybody. I think that the chat window has been great during this conversation. So what we're actually going to do is allow you guys to have another session. We're going to do another session on November 13, which is about 3 weeks away. Where we'll allow everybody to have their microphones on and we'll actually have a discussion, probably slightly smaller group than the one here today, but no doubt less, just as discursive. So there's an opportunity. I've got the time written down on the poll, so please check your calendar and see if you can make it, because we will literally send you a calendar invite if you say yes to this. And if you say maybe, we'll send you some more information before that. So have a look at the questions there. The second part is a multiple choice. You can choose more than one. And over to the panel for your quick, what is it that you're going to do as CEO on Monday morning? Monica, you unmuted yourself,
I
which
did.
I
So I think
that says I'm
that
going
says
to
it.
so
But
well done.
first comment, the quick comment was just to thank Michelle. She put she said content is she said context is queen, and I love that. I think that's just something to keep in mind. So for me, I think what I would want to do, it's certainly what you will raise my awareness of, is every initiative that we do, I think we have to start off thinking, what is the accessibility? We have these incredible, whatever the idea is, I think the first question that should be asked is, how do we make it accessible to everybody? I think that way we will start being able to really ensure that what we're bringing is available to anyone that's willing to access and learn. And I think that way we will start getting that two-way street where we then become aware of, is our content, is what we're bringing relevant, are people engaging, and start seeing those metrics that we want to understand so that we're bringing something of value. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Who's next?
I think I concur with Monica, and I'm just actually surprised how much we think alike. So if I'm the CEO Monday morning, first thing I'll add access as the parameter in everything I do. I'll just keep it short, and I agree with everything Monica said.
Thank you, Mansi. I appreciate that. So Monica, +1. Kish.
I think I'd create an innovation ecosystem or a lab where basically it doesn't matter who you are in the business, you can get funding, you can come with ideas, the best ideas win, but more importantly, create a space where people can fail and it is the first attempt in learning and it's celebrated. But as long as the learnings can be transferred throughout organizations, taking down the silos, so that there's positivity around it, then that is probably what I think about doing.
Marvelous. Jonathan, looks like you got the final word, but just a few seconds for it, I'm afraid.
Well, it won't surprise you to know that every Monday morning we do sit down and think about accessibility. So it's going to carry on. We're on a mission. We're going to make it accessible for every healthcare professional.
Marvelous. Well, thank you, Jonathan. We are inspired by that. Okay. Really appreciate everybody who contributed, both, of course, to the panelists who've given their energy, time, insights, and intelligence to this conversation. Massively, massively appreciated. And, of course, to all of those of you in the audience who decided to chat or just vote in the polls or be here and listen. It is massively appreciated. I love it when we get to focus on topics like these. It's, what we at Impatient Health feel like we're here to do as well. Sometimes the industry needs a little push. We don't rely on market research here. We rely on market leadership, shall we say. So please do continue to share any comments in the chat window. I'm going to hold this open for a minute or two. So if you've got time to make any further suggestions or comments, please do write them before you go to your next meeting. But from now, thank you so much from me. Thank you very much from everyone that you can see, and massively appreciate it. We'll see you again, hopefully at that roundtable session in a couple of weeks' time, but if not, sometime elsewhere very soon. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.